Knick-knack, paddywhack. Let's talk about Waxahatchee. Right here on the Extended Play Podcast.
Welcome back to the Extended Play Podcast with Ian Tank. We are a music discussion podcast without the hipster snobbery. Today, we are going to be reviewing the new album from Waxahatchee, which just came out at time of recording just a couple days ago.
Yeah.
This is going to be our fastest response ever to an album.
Yeah.
But
we're relevant.
We, if nothing else, well, we're a lot of other things too, but
that's true.
We're trying for the relevance part anyway. So we were looking through the upcoming album releases, and we thought we're just trying to pinpoint something that we both were curious about, something that fit with our own vibes, things we've been interested in the past. And just recently, we included a song by Waxahatchee in one of the playlist challenges and thought, well, this is a perfect opportunity. Why not get into it? It's an artist that I've always wanted to look into a little bit deeper, and this kind of gives us the chance. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. A little bit of background. So this is our fourth album review. If you want to go back in our history, we've we've reviewed the album SOS by SZA. We did... what's our second one? We did the Andre 3000 flute album, and we did most recently the Smiles latest album. So this is our fourth. Let us know in the comments if you want us to keep doing album reviews. We're really enjoying it. I think it's fun. It gets us to pay really close attention to one album at a time. So
if you don't, just keep it to yourself.
Please, don't ruin it for everybody. Okay, the rest of us are at least we're enjoying it. A little bit about our scoring system, really briefly. We go out of 20 because it's twice as good as 10.
Right.
So our final score is an average between the two of us. So far, the scores have been middle of the road, mostly.
Upper middle.
Yeah, upper middle. So I think
like 3.5 to 4 stars out of 5.
Yeah,
to use a completely arbitrary and confusingly similar scale.
Right. We're critical when we need to be, but we want these albums to be good. I got to say, that's a confession we make. We're looking for these albums to be good. Yeah. So that's the attitude we're going into it. So without further ado, let's get started. All right. A little background. I think I can go to a little bit of background about the album itself, about Waxahatchee, if you don't mind. This is her sixth album. Last one was St. Cloud back in 2020, and that made a big splash in sort of the indie rock world. Highly successful. I read an interview recently with her in Pitchfork, I believe, where she said that it basically doubled her audience, that album. So you got 4 albums, double your audience, and now this is the follow-up.
Funny anecdotal. I legit thought this was her second album.
Oh, okay.
I mean, and I did a fair amount of research, but apparently not that thorough. Okay. Because I remember St. Cloud, but I didn't know there were albums before.
Yeah. That. And I got around the third or fourth album I started listening to her when she sounded definitely more indie rock, loud guitars. And this is not that. And we'll get into the sound of this album too. St. Cloud was kind of a departure for her. And it sounds like this is kind of like the style that she's settling into.
Right.
So some other things, she got sober right before recording this album, I think before the last album. So it's kind of a new thing where she was, and I think it also kind of reflected in the tone of the album, maybe the lyrics, less abrasive, less kind of all over the place and chaotic. She's from Alabama. She was an English major at Alabama for 3 years. I learned. Makes a lot of sense when you get into the lyrics, actually.
Right.
So I didn't previously associate her with sort of like a Southern thing, but then when I dug into this more, it did feel very Southern to me in a lot of ways.
Right.
So, we talked about Right Back to It in one of our previous playlist challenges. We'll link down that below and somewhere up here. But you pre-ordered the album, so you got to hear a couple of tracks. 3 tracks.
Yeah, I think Bored and 365 were the other tracks.
Okay. 12 tracks, 43 minutes. I mean, it's a solid like 3.5 minute pop song straight throughout. So pretty straightforward. I think that's enough background for everybody. For those of you who are super familiar with her, I'm sure you're rolling your eyes right now, but bear with us.
Yeah. Trying to find a happy medium here, folks.
That's right. So you want to get into your impressions?
Sure.
Okay.
So we both have our own kind of unique scoring methods. So I have 4 categories that I use to come up with my score, and they are lyrics, presentation, musicianship, and songcraft. Presentation includes like production and just overall, presentation. And songcraft is a little vague, but it's, look, how well are the songs put together? How much effort is put into them? Overall vibe you get. And the other 2 pretty self-explanatory. So
all weighted equally.
Yes.
All weighted equally.
I rate those all 1 through 10, add them up, divide by 4. And if there's rounding that needs to happen, we do that. And we get the final score. So I think maybe a little bit of a twist. I'll start with the final answer, and then we'll back in.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So this one overall got a 7.
Okay.
Now, a huge disclaimer, though. I listened to this album and made this critical judgment while in the throes of a horrible stomach virus.
Which you can hear the after effects of a little bit, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I probably can add 1, maybe, in the fact that under normal circumstances would not be so bitter and dehydrated.
Yeah.
But that being said, at a moment in time, this is what I got out of it. So for lyrics, I gave it a 6. I don't know what she's getting at most of the time, which frustrates me.
Okay.
And we've gone through this over and over again where, and I've also brought up many times how what we're doing here, if you're not already familiar, you're kind of handicapped if the content has some depth to it.
Sure.
Because, we don't have a month to listen to each album.
Right.
And then give an honest review. So in a timely fashion anyway. So that part, okay. But it was really hit or miss. I felt like there were some nuggets of lyrical passages that were really good, really clever. Like on Three Sisters, there's a line that's, "Am I your moat or your drawbridge?"
I love that. I made a note of that as well.
Right.
That was really good.
Justify and scrape by. I was always the one unsteady. It's a state of mind, you malign, and you don't get caught up in mine. I'm defenseless against the sales pitch. Am I your moat or your drawbridge? It plays on my mind how the time passes, holds you like pocket change.
There's a lot of relationship lyrics in the first half of the album, which I can only take so much of at once.
Sure. Okay.
So, and for other reasons, regarding presentation to get to later, if I were the producer, which I realize I'm not going to be asked to do that, I think sequencing was very poor in this album.
Wow. Okay.
I think it would have done very well to mix some of the songs up because I really got stuck on the first few tracks of the album.
Okay.
Where I'm like, all right, and then as it went on, it was a nice, refreshing change.
Okay.
I'm like, they probably could have slid one of those.
Okay.
out.
Okay.
But yeah, then there's, when I'm said very uneven, but there's some clever passages that, and then there's somewhere it's just flat, but I get caught up in my thoughts for lack of a better cause. My life's been mapped out to a T, but I'm always a little lost. Again, very good.
That's great.
On Crowbar though, in particular, just trying too hard.
Lyrically?
Yeah.
Okay. Lots too many ideas out there.
Lots of big words. Okay. We get, now it's funny because that's the first thing I thought when you said she was an English major. I'm like, yep.
Showing off, trying to prove it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So all in all, I give it a 6, only because for better or worse, I guess I'm locked into being consistent with, I have to get it at least a little bit the first time around.
Okay.
That's not to say that, and I can already see it now with some of the things we've looked at in the past where I regret it 3 to 6 months later.
Sure.
But again, these reviews are for people who want to listen to it for the first time.
Right.
I would think.
Yes.
Not someone who's like, what should I go invest a year in?
Right.
So I give it a 6 on lyrics. Presentation, I gave it a 7. I don't know that she has the voice strength to be this prominent in the mix.
Okay.
It's not bad, but there's definitely a variation in tone on the different songs. And when she's in the higher registers, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. And that's, again, the first few songs, it's very much in this high. It really got grating. And I thought, okay, this is going to be a bit of a slog to get through it.
Yes. Yeah.
In the later songs, like Bored and Right Back to It, it comes down to a register that I'm much more comfortable taking it in at. The production on this album is great.
Yeah, sounded great.
It's very dynamic. It's not overly compressed. I don't know. That's the only thing I really would have reconsidered is the ordering of the songs, which is a very, again, it's kind of arrogant of a listener to think they would do that. It's the way. At
the same time, this is an album review. I mean, it's as a whole. So that's
true.
That's a fair criticism.
That's true. Yeah. Thanks, man.
I got your back.
Yeah, thanks. So there's not a whole lot more I have to say about the presentation aspect, other than it's solid. It's a 7, very well produced. You know, the voice, like I said, is hit or miss, and I'll touch on that again later. Musicianship, I give an 8. It's got great swing and twang throughout it. It feels tight, but not soulless, which is a very tough balance to strike.
It really is.
A lot of times you can get technically proficient musicians where, okay, it comes off really tight and put together, but then it seems kind of stale and formulaic.
Right.
Not the case here. Now, Ice Cold is a great example of this, but the voice and the lyrics on that song drive me crazy. So, ironically, I feel like the peak of the musicianship is one of the valleys of the other aspects of the song. Very good choices of where to spice it up with a new instrument or a flourish. I thought that was well done. The musicianship is just tight throughout. So I think it's pretty impressive. That's how it ends up with an 8. Yeah. And again, most of my quibbles are with the voice and the lyrics. Now songcraft, the final category, I also give a 7. Same as presentation. First part I touched on. The first few songs really sounded too similar for me, and not in a good way. It didn't latch on, and I was like, geez, another one of these. After the first few, though, every song really does have its own personality, and it definitely got better as it went on, and really felt like, all right, now, you know, they go on a slightly different path. I feel like the BPM on these songs are all very similar.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So I think, again, if I was playing amateur uninvited record producer, like one kind of hard rocky, kind of bluesy, jammy song really would have broken this up nicely. Again, she could be like, who the fuck are you?
Well, of course.
I don't want to do that.
We are nobody, for the record.
Yes, very true. I thought that would have been nice too, but it very much, not to say that it's one note, but very much the same tempo throughout the whole album, which might have been intentional for all we know. So overall, it ends up being a 7 based on 6, 7, 7, and 8. The best songs, I think, the ones to go find would be Three Sisters, Right Back to It. I think Right Back to It might be the best song.
It might be the best song in the album.
I mean, I know that that's not cool to, you know, but there's a reason why it's the
first single.
Right. They're trying to move units. But Bored and 365, also very good.
Very good.
Crowbar and Ice Cold. No bueno for me. But the one open-ended thing that I will end my portion with as an open-ended thing also to you is, so this kind of music, this indie folk rocky kind of stuff, how much can they do, when I say how much can they do with it to really stand out? Because there's no riffs, there's no beats. And it's entirely lyrics and voice.
It is.
And so I enjoyed the album, but I'm like, it just mystified me further. I waited till after I gave my opinion, not that it fucking matters, to look at what the real reviews said. And they were very positive. Incredibly positive, which I'm sure you'll touch on. But I'm like, what really differentiates these? Because, you know, there's not, musically, there's not a whole lot you can do to be, this is trend setting. It's not like a Radiohead thing where it's like, no one's done this before. And with like hip hop, you have beats there's almost limitless to what you can do with it. But when you have acoustic guitar, and you could throw in Southern flourishes like she has here. But I'm like, how do they really straitiate, and where do you go to do something new?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I mean, if we were comparing St. Cloud to this, that would be a good conversation to have. Like, what happened there? How do you just make the same thing you made last time, or do you put subtle twists on it? Okay. Yeah, I actually had a note about that, about the genre as a whole, because there was a time in this album overall reminded me a lot in the sort of early 2000s, and listening to a lot of when Alt.country was like a thing, when there was like Whiskey Town and then Ryan Adams out of that, and Wilco and Sunbolt and all these old 97s, Jayhawks, all these bands. And I got heavily into it. And they were, in a lot of instances, you know, you could drop one, pick up the other, and without much of a difference. Like, I think that maybe the amateur listener, someone who didn't get too deep into music, wouldn't be able to tell one from the other in some instances, other than if you have a super unique voice or things like that. And this felt like that time period sort of musically. So then I thought, well, why is this why am I responding to it now? One, because I forced myself to listen to the whole thing. There's probably been plenty of alt-country or folkish stuff that have come out in the past 10 years I just haven't paid attention to.
Right.
But I don't go back to a lot of that alt-country stuff besides Wilco. So, well, what did Wilco do? Well, they put their own spin on it by sort of turning songs inside out and playing tracks in reverse and weird feedback and all that kind of stuff.
And there were poppy aspects to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then I was thinking, what made this stand out for me? Because I really enjoyed the album. And I think it is sounds very basic. It is the sound of her voice, the actual timbre of her voice. I agree. I made a note that it's too high in the mix, generally. And I think probably earlier on in her career where she's got loud guitars with lots of fuzz and stuff and distortion, it probably served her better. She could kind of sit back a little bit. But for someone in indie rock, part of the indie rock thing is to not have a technically perfect voice.
I guess.
Right.
But even not technically perfect, I don't know, like a soulness or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. It didn't have the weight.
Okay.
Even if it's not technically perfect, it was like, above a certain level, just wasn't pleasant to listen to.
Okay. Yeah. There were moments where she would hit a note where I'm like, ooh boy, that's a little much. It would like actually get sort of irritating to my ears. But the way, this sounds so stupid, I wrote it down again and again, the way she pronounces words, it's not a Southern accent, the way she's pronouncing things, but she has her own sort of way of delivering some of these word choices. And I'm not going to like try to repeat it, but listen to the album. And sometimes where it should be a long O sound, she chooses a short O sound, and she's rhyming words that do not rhyme with one another, but she's consistent about it. She always will say these words in this particular way. And I found that really endearing. It made it more personal and less cookie cutter to me. So that was something that kind of stood out about that. And the unique word choice and phrasing. I agree with you that there are times when it served the song very well. There are times where I got the feeling like if she would have just chose these songs to be straight up love songs with very sort of average pop song lyrics like Lost Love or if it told a story, because none of these songs I don't feel like tell an actual story.
No, it's part of my frustration.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, give me a narrative to follow.
Yeah, you're getting a little bit of this here, a little bit of that there. And I think that's what makes it unique. That's what makes it a little indie rock. And I enjoyed it when it worked. And when it worked fantastically. You pointed out a great line. There's so many of them. I wrote down a bunch of them. My spine's a rotted 2x4. My barely hanging on. My benevolence just hits the floor. I mean, it's just fantastic shit. But too often she'd have a metaphor in one line and a metaphor in the next line, a completely different metaphor. So she wouldn't continue them. So they'd seem like two separate thoughts, and I couldn't connect the dots in those instances. So then what is the entire song about? And so eventually, I think probably like 3 or 4 songs in, I stopped trying to do that. I stopped trying to make sense of songs as a story, being lyrically sort of cohesive and more just trying to pick up on the general vibe throughout.
Which I probably should have done.
Yeah.
Right. Because that was some of my frustration is I would go song to song. Second frustration, by the way.
Yeah.
Lyrics not on Spotify.
Oh, that's weird.
What the fuck, dude?
They were I got a free trial of Apple Music and I used it this time and they were in Apple Music.
Yeah. So now I got fucking Genius on one screen.
That's no fun.
No, I got Word on another. I got Spotify on a third. Yeah. But so that was some of my frustration too, is trying to follow along the lyrics.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it's lyrically dense.
Yes.
I mean, she's singing like there's not a lot of long instrumental breaks. There's enough. There's enough. It wasn't overwhelming that way. Yeah, but so an alternative example would be where she says I don't remember what song it is, but she says, my expectations are a cinder block I tote around like a hollow gun. And I'm like, cinder block, hollow gun? Like I was having trouble. Like it was too much for me. It was overwhelming. And that took me out of it. And again, I've gone on record as saying lyrics are not as important to me. They can hurt a song more than they can help a song. So that's sort of the vibe I'm coming from. But also, when you do an album review and you listen really closely, you're paying way more attention to lyrics than you would otherwise. So, I actually liked the pacing of the album.
Okay.
I felt like the first 2 songs were very similar And then by the time they got to the third, Right Back to It, actually, I think is in the wrong spot in the album. It's too big of a flip from whatever the previous song is. I don't remember. I remember being like, and that might be a result of me already knowing the song from it being a single.
That's true.
But I remember thinking like, yeah.
I'll pull up the track listing.
Yeah. Well, I should have it right here.
There you go.
Bought the record. I actually bought the record. Thanks to Detroit Record Club for putting this aside for me. I almost got it a whole day early. Three Sisters, Evil Spawn, Ice Cold, Right Back to It. So maybe it's Ice Cold right before Right Back to It is too sort of a stark of a contrast. But I don't know. I think maybe it's because I listened to it. This is the most I've listened to an album that we reviewed. I listened to it 4 times.
Wow.
Yeah. Once, first time on vinyl, realizing that my stereo is not great for picking up lyrics. The next time in the car, the next 2 times in the car, and the 4th time in the cans. And that's the way to go. I feel like
for sure.
It's just the way to go.
Yeah.
So I did. I thought it was actually, it was clearly an entire album. This sounded like one artistic statement to me, clearly. Yep. Like, and there were minor errors where you feel like this was, so where I noticed that the most was in the drumming. And I know you're big into drums. The first track, I think, has none, essentially. There are a number of tracks, maybe 3 or 4 out of the 12, where you have just like a bass kick throughout it, no cymbals. And when that happens in a typical song, you're waiting for a moment where everything crashes in and it breaks and you get the reward, you get the drop. And there are 2 or 3 instances where there's no drop. And I can't get past that. That's very challenging for me to get past.
Right.
So when she had a song like that and then had a song that was more up-tempo and had the full drum treatment, it was a stark contrast to me. Yeah. But there were times that I really liked that as well. Like, let's change it up. I don't want a bunch of songs to sound exactly the same right in a row.
Right. And I was thinking, had I listened to this on shuffle, I probably would have had a more positive overall.
It's really the sequence.
That and my explosive diarrhea at the time.
Okay.
Probably just got off to a bad start, and it's hard. Once you've gotten that mindset, it's hard to.
At any moment.
Right.
You have to run for the hills.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
A few other things I wrote. This is what, to me, country radio should sound like.
Yes.
If country radio sounded like this, I'd listen to it all the time. I think this is what country really, because to anybody else, again, this is one of those albums, if I played it for my wife, she'd go, why are you listening to country?
Right.
It's not. Clearly, there's nuance involved, but it sounds like it. And it's not paint by numbers country.
Right, because they're not talking about Jesus and pickup trucks.
Exactly right. And I wrote down even that she only mentions places like 3 times. She says Bama, she says the name of a river, and she says one more town. And that's it. That's through 12 songs. Rather than you get beat over the head with My Tennessee Girl and with her Mississippi Style and all this bullshit in modern country. I wish more stuff sounded like this. Like, fucking take a chance. That's not going to happen. But, so I actually I came up with a scoring system. And I fly by the seat of my pants, and I just thought I needed something to rein myself in.
Most excited to find out what this is.
Absolutely. And it's my scoring system.
Wow.
It's not what makes an album good to anybody else but me.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So it's very personal. And that took a while to kind of sort through, like, what is it about, like, what makes me different than another listener? And my 3 categories were originality, which is a really important, as we've talked about many times on the show, really important to me. Cohesion, okay, and repeatability. And some of them blend into each other a little bit. I found like maybe these might not be my final categories. I might change them along the way.
You'll still learn, like I did, that limiting yourself to 4 categories
right
becomes very restrictive.
Yes. But anyway, so let's dig into it. So originality, I gave it an 8, and I gave it an 8 because so you mentioned before, like, how does this distinguish itself from anything else?
Right.
It's an 8 for me because I'm not listening to anything else like this right now.
Oh.
So it was a breath of fresh air for me because I've avoided this genre because it got too paint by numbers, and now just sort of being like reintroduced to it. It was like a warm hug. And the music itself feels like a warm hug with the instrumentation and the banjo, the harmonica, the piano, the slide guitar, all that stuff. It's just, there's a warmth to it. Anyway, that I felt like it was modern and timeless at the same time.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Part of that, again, her diction, her word choice, the power of her voice, positive and negative, right? That's where you take off. You can see if you're going out of 10, you take off 2 points there. Her accent or the way her voice sounds. So those things. Cohesion, I gave a 9. It sounds like one artistic statement to me, as I said before. There's stuff to unpack, but I see. So I had an advantage here. The Pitchfork review did mention this long-term relationship she's been in.
Okay.
And it's with another musician named Kevin Morby. And it was an interview. I read the interview. I try not to read things beforehand. I wanted to sort of understand where she was coming from and where she was in her career. And that's what that article was supposed to be about. Inevitably, it started to influence the way I thought about the lyrics. And there are a number of songs when you kind of knowing that in the back of your head, you're like, oh, I get it. She's talking about this comfortable zone you get in a very long-term relationship and how challenging that could be to sort of, when you're second guessing, like, what am I doing? Or where's the romance gone and things like that. It's clear that she's sort of wrestling with those sorts of things. And knowing that, I had another in. It's like I could take 2 more steps into the music.
Yeah.
I thought it was listenable all the way through. I had one skip, and it was one of the songs you mentioned where it was just like, it was the one where she just goes too far vocally.
It might be Ice Cold.
It might be Ice Cold, where that was the one skip. Everything else I would play all the way through.
Yep.
And when we grew up in the age where you were listening to full albums all the time, we grew up in the age when you're listening to albums all the way through a lot because it was just the easiest thing to do. It means a lot to me. And as an album, I thought that was very cohesive that way. And it wasn't boring. I did not get bored. I was like, what's going to come next? What's she going to say next? What's this song going to sound like? What's going to be the prominent instrument? I was always waiting for like kind of what was coming next. Repeatability, I actually ranked very high. I ranked a 9 because I listened to it 4 times because I wanted to. Okay. I really, whatever this was, and I talked earlier in my review of The Smile, like I was listening to a lot of jazz right then. And so then I had this jazz focus in my head. And then I listened to the album and I probably scored it higher than I would have at any other point when I scored it. And I think this is probably the same case because I'm not listening to anything like it. So I want to listen to it over and over again and dig into it. Again, because it's an exception to my current listening. So I think we said 8, 9, 9.
I think so.
8, 9, 9. So pause for math. So that makes it just about under a 9 for me. I had a great time with it. I think, I am very optimistic in these reviews. I think what I'm finding is that I want it to be, I think we're opposites this way. Not that you're pessimistic, but I think you often say, I think if I went back and listened more, I probably have better things to say and I'd rank it higher.
Yeah.
I'd probably do the opposite. I think there's a lot of the blush of the original nature of it, of me spending a lot of time with an album.
Which, funny enough, it goes all the way back to our first episode of how our relationship with music.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you want to find something new and I want to build a relationship.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, this is the first date. And I'm like, I don't know, that bitch could be crazy. And you're in the car driving home like, that was great. I can't wait.
Love of my life.
Yeah.
I'm marrying this one.
Yeah. No, I was actually going to propose maybe one thing we should do as a footnote to these is I will say, I don't see, if we went back and gave a score a year later, I don't see this one going down. I see it going up.
You see it going up. Okay.
So I think there's some, like, if maybe it was an album that was really catchy and full of these songs, like, oh, this is awesome. But then, like, I realized, like, it's very thin and I never went back to it.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think I will agree, my impression of this is probably as bad as it would get. And I did buy the album. Okay. So I'm going to be listening to it.
Yeah, right. It's in the rotation automatically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I could totally see that. I'd be like, okay, you know what? It just needed more. And, I was pissing out my ass that day.
Yikes. No, but that's good. That's why this works to me. And that's why we average the scores, or why we add the scores together to get a 20-point score. So you are at a 7. I was at a 9.
So that's 16.
That's 16. How does that rank? I think we gave a 16 to The Smile as well.
I think the Andre 3000 was about 14-ish. Yeah, but this is to be expected.
Yeah.
I mean, we're picking ostensibly good albums.
Yeah. Right. And we have not come across in our 4 albums now a masterpiece.
No.
Agreed on by both of us anyway.
Now, I will say as a footnote, because I don't see us reviewing this one because it's maybe too similar. I also bought the Faye Webster album.
Oh, okay.
And I think that is a better album.
Okay. Fascinating.
And it's funny because I looked at the reviews and it's not as well reviewed.
But pretty well reviewed, right?
Pretty well reviewed, but not, to me, it addresses all these weak points.
Okay.
She does. It's very similar, but it's less country, more popish.
Yes.
But there are flourishes of unpredictability
For sure.
and changing things up.
Yeah.
That and that could have tainted my
Maybe.
because I just came back from a vacation where I listened to that album like 10 times.
Okay.
And
Oh, sure.
maybe I was waiting for like
Right.
that kind of energy to come up and it just didn't.
And
But-
it didn't. Okay. Oh, that's fascinating.
So Underdressed at the Symphony. Is that the name of the album?
I believe so.
I think so.
Yes.
I should know. I bought it.
Yeah. And you're the one who gave me the tidbit that it comes from an actual thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, check that out too, folks.
Yeah.
Maybe pick it up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it for our album review of Tiger's Blood. I don't know if we ever said Tiger's Blood in the whole
I don't think we
episode.
did.
The album is Tiger's Blood by Waxahatchee. It just came out. Please check the album out. Check out a few singles anyway. Let us know what you think in the comments. Did we get it right? Did we get it wrong? Somewhere in between. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you like this kind of content, if you want more album reviews, let us know. And we've said it a million times. Let us know what you think we should review next. We'd love a suggestion because we can definitely get in our own lanes, and we'd love sort of like an off the wall suggestion. That'd be great. But so until next time, see ya.
See you.